Hi everyone, and welcome to this video on project-based learning. Before we get started, I have to confess, as a student myself, I absolutely hated doing group work or any kind of group work or project-based work because I found it really frustrating to work with other people. Because what happens when we as teachers ask students to do group work for a project? Well, if your experience was anything like mine, I always ended up doing all the work for everybody in the team. And honestly, this is probably because I'm a little bit of a perfectionist and I like to have control. I like to be the boss, and I just ended up taking over everything. So often what happens is that the students kind of take on roles naturally. So there's like the boss or one person who does all the stuff. There are kids that are kind of slackers, or probably honestly more pacifist, who just looks at this person and says, okay, and you take it over. And then what happens is you get one grade for the whole group, and it's just not fair. One person's done all the work and the others haven't really done much, and they all get the same grade. I found it super frustrating as a student, and so I decided never to do it as a teacher. And that worked out well for a couple of years until I sort of started really wanting to get back into it, but again was kind of scared to get into that horrible dynamic of one person doing the work and the other one's not. And then I had a really interesting experience. I was invited through a friend to tour a factory where they make trucks, Peterbilt trucks. So I went to this huge factory floor and got to see all the different places where they assemble the truck parts. And we went to the marketing department and saw how they marketed the new trucks. We went to the engineering department where they had the designs for new trucks. We went to the factory floor where some people assembled the wheels on the truck, some people did the cab, some did the paintwork, on and on and on. And it just seemed to me, wow, we should learn something from these real life projects. When kids leave school, we don't expect them to sort of go out and make the whole truck by themselves. They work on a team. So why can't we do this in the classroom? Right? In reality, each organization is divided up into different roles. So even in a school, we have principal and vice principal and different teachers and staff that support. So the reality outside of the classroom is that we all work together in one organization, but everybody has their own individual responsibilities. Everyone is accountable for their own work, right? So if the guy making the wheels on the truck isn't doing a good job and the wheels start to fall off, we all suffer, but the guy making the wheels is the one that gets fired. The success of the group depends on the success of the individuals. So how can we replicate this in the classroom? So I think the key here was that there is group collaboration towards an end goal, but individual evaluation. So if we can include those two features, then we've won in project-based learning. So group collaboration, individual evaluation. All right, so getting back to project-based learning. What is it all about? Well, project-based learning starts with a question, usually anchored in a real-world problem. The students get to make active investigations, apply their knowledge, apply their information, and represent their knowledge. And they get to collaborate and use technology. Okay, so what does that look like in a classroom? Well, following the Programme de Formation d'Éducation du Québec, the PFEQ, or the Ministry Program for Education, in ESL we have the production process. So we have 3 stages: pre-production, production, and post-production. And project-based learning, it looks like this. Pre-production, the teams get together and brainstorm ideas. They're assigned roles, so who's putting the wheels on the truck, who's designing the truck, and who's driving the truck. Then the individuals go out and research different aspects of their project and bring back the results. Then they get back into production. So the first thing that they do is each individual has a writing task. Okay, so one person is writing about the wheels of the truck, one person is writing about the engine of the truck, and one person's writing about the design of the truck. And then each person has a production task. One person will be responsible for producing a drawing of the overall truck. One person will be responsible for painting the truck, and one person will be responsible for sticking those wheels on. In post-production, they share the results of their individual work together. They stick it all together and share it with the class. And all the way through, and this is key, they're being evaluated individually. So in each one of these tasks, they are evaluated individually. The writing task, production task, and the overall task. So as a teacher, how do we set up an effective project with your students? Well, I've broken it down into a different set of steps. So the first thing that you have to do as a teacher is say, okay, what's my topic or theme? For example, I'm going to use this all the way through. An example might be endangered animals. Let's say you've been reading a lot about endangered animals and you want the kids to go out and find more information about their own new endangered animal. You're going to consider the final product. And I've written in here choice because often as we get into project-based learning, you can let the students come up with their own choices. But just to get started, we'll give them an end product that we want them to do. So for example, they're going to present the results of their research about endangered animals as a poster. Determine the teams. So this is important as a teacher. You need to figure out who goes in the teams together. Will you let them have the choice, or are you going to put them in teams? My preferred number of students in a team is 3. I think 2 or 3 is great. More than that, they tend to go off track, but that's just my own preference. The next thing you're going to have to figure out is your timeline and objectives. So for example, how many classes is it going to take? 1 class, 2 class, 3 classes, 4 classes? Okay, I've got 4 classes. And then you're going to have to create guidelines and instructions for students to follow. So you know the topic, you know the end product, you know how many kids are working together, you know how many classes, what's going to happen in each class. You're going to have a handout or something for them to do each class and a deliverable. And finally, you're going to need to determine how this project is evaluated. So let's look at each of these steps in turn with my example. So in this project, I've planned for a grade 5 class again, and the topic is endangered animal. The first things I'm going to do is determine my objective. What is it that I want the students to do? Using the Programme de Formation d'Éducation du Québec, the PFEQ, I've borrowed it directly from there, so this is a competency 2. Reinvest understanding about endangered animals by choosing a new endangered animal to research and promote. I'm going to determine the final product. I said it could be a poster, maybe web page or commercial magazine ad. I've chosen a poster. I'm going to determine the teams. I've chosen groups of 3, but you can also do things like isometrics, so like a combination of teacher choice and student choice. You can ask students who they'd like to work with, hand in those names on some cards, and use those cards to build the teams. So once you've determined what your objective is and the end product, you're going to now have to look at how many classes and what the students will do during the class and what you allow them to do outside the class. You need to include organized class time with specific objectives for the group to meet and work on. And this is the key. You can't simply say to the kids, okay, go ahead and research endangered animals and produce a poster. You have 4 classes to do it. Because what will happen is 3 of the 4 classes, they'll just mess around, and in the 4th class, they'll panic and not meet the deadline. So each class, you have to set out specific things that they're doing. So for example, in class 1, their job is to brainstorm. They have to decide the topic, determine the roles, and start researching. That's what we're going to do. And they have to do something and give something in by the end of the class. In class 2, that class is dedicated for writing the text. So everybody should be writing their texts individually. Once they're done, they can meet back up with their team and exchange and share their texts and read them to each other. Class 3 is they're going to put together their poster. So they take their texts, they bring their poster board together, they can review what they've written and write up a nice clean copy, stick on their images, all that stuff. And class 4 is our post-production. So this is when we do our sharing with the class. I like to do it in kind of a science fair style where we have posters around the room and different people come up and have a look at the posters and you kind of share. I also need to determine evaluation. Now, the great thing about project-based learning is that you can evaluate all 3 competencies if you want. And we'll take a look at how that plays out. What are the evaluation criteria? What kind of evaluation tools are you going to use? Okay, so let's have a look at this. I'm going to show you a long-term plan. This is what I'm going to write out when I'm planning my project-based learning. So as you can see here, I've got 4 classes plus some room for homework in here. So class 1 typically is going to be the introduction. I'm going to introduce the project, we're going to explore it together. I'll put the kids into teams and get them to brainstorm and pick really interesting ideas to explore further. I'm going to evaluate their C1 because if they're working in teams, this is a great opportunity for me to evaluate how they interact orally with each other in English. Class 2, now we're digging into it. So we're going to do the research. I'm going to give them comprehension questions to guide them about their topic. I want them to summarize their information. So if it's about endangered animals, we're going to see that one person will research their habitat, for example. One person will research their natural enemies, and another person might research the kind of food that they eat. Okay, they're going to start thinking about their presentation format, and they're going to start writing the rough draft of their text. What can I evaluate? Well, I'm going to evaluate C2, evidence of understanding, because they should be able to start answering questions about their animals, the aspect of the animal that they're researching. At this point, I'm going to remind them that they probably need to start doing homework. So they can do more research individually. And before class number 3, they need to bring a rough draft of their text, okay, so that they come into class 3 and they can share it with their buddies. Okay, so yeah, evaluation. So in class number 3, they come in with their rough draft of their text. So one kid has the text on the habitat, and one kid has the text on the food, and one kid has a text on the natural predators. They read them out loud, they share ideas, they critique each other's text, give feedback, notice some mistakes, they ask questions, make sure it looks really good. So I can evaluate their C1, and I can also check in on their C2. Okay, kind of a reinvestment task. Finally, I'm going to say, complete your text outside of class. And in the final class, we're going to do our presentation. As I've mentioned before, I like to do it in kind of like a forum, like a science fair, so that half the class is presenting and the other class is circulating. And there's kind of like opportunities for Q&A to go on. So you're asking different people questions about the animal that they chose, rather than standing in front of a whole class. And I can evaluate C1 if there's some Q&A. So if the kids are going around the class asking each other questions, they're interacting orally. I can evaluate that. And when they hand in their poster, I'm going to see each person's individual written work on the poster. I can evaluate each person's individual content and formulation. So it's entirely possible that the kid that wrote the text on food gets a B, and the kid that wrote the text on habitat of the animal gets an A, and the kid that wrote the text on the natural predators gets a C, because they've each written their stuff individually, even though they've collaborated together to make this poster. So I talked about evaluation. It's important to know what criteria I'm looking for. This is from the program, right? So grade 5, ESL, C1 evaluation, these are the things that we are asked to look for. I wouldn't give that to the kids. I would say to the kids, as you're working, are you always speaking in English? Are you on topic? Are you using the phrases and vocabulary you practiced? Are you encouraging your friends to keep speaking? Whoops, I come back. So you can see that this is the criteria, but this is the phrasing for the kids in their language. For C2, remember that this whole project is about reinvestment, right? Reinvestment of information and ideas into a new product. I would ask the kids to find at least 3 resources, right? Selection of ideas from a new source. I would check their notes about the animal because we practice summarizing. Did they use words and expressions from their research without copying the whole thing? Did they use their own words and ideas to explain the topic? So that's what I'm looking for. For C3, because they're writing a text, right? Are they using grammar, punctuation, spelling of words? Again, these are what we have from the ministry. And this is what I would tell the kids that I'm looking for. Write a short text about your animal. You have to include at least three facts, right? Text, form, and requirement. You need to use the present tense correctly. The kimono dragon is dangerous. The kimono dragon eats meat, okay, present tense. Uses capital letters correctly because that's what we've been working on. And we've spelled important words correctly. So things like the name of the animal, its habitat, those are the important words. And the format is interesting and appealing. So that is the poster. We can give some points for that too. So overall, I would give the kids a sheet, something that looked like this. This is my overall evaluation. So when am I evaluating C1? Whenever there's pair or group work. And these are the things I'm looking for. I'm going to give them a mark out of 10. Evaluating C2, when you're researching your animal. Did you do all these things? And that I look at in class 3. Writing a short text about your animal. This is our final product. That's what I'm looking for. You present it to the class and you hand it in. And that's worth 20 points. Okay, so that's how I would set up a project. You need to guide the students until they get the hang of things. As I say, you cannot throw them into a class and just say produce a poster. It doesn't work. You need to really structure everything. So that means you need to help them out, especially when they're starting. Give them predefined roles and responsibilities. So one person is the writer, one person's the leader, one person's in charge of the materials, for example. Every class, you need to have handouts that they can fill in to keep them on task and to keep them organized. You need to help them form their groups based on their abilities and the skills that they have. So although they'll want to work with their buddies, make sure that that is going to be a healthy dynamic for everyone. Because we all know that as a team, we can create problems none of us could cause as individuals. All right. So as I said, a key to success for this is having really strong materials in place. So guidelines and handouts that will support them through the project-based learning. So the number one thing you need to have for the kids is clear, simple point form instructions. Okay, I cannot overstate this. Do not write in paragraphs. Simple point form instructions or you're going to lose them. And you need to break them down step by step. Clear parameters. Each class, what do you want them to do? Okay. If it's a writing, then you need to tell them how much they need to write. What kind of ideas are they including? What kind of format? What kind of grammar? Be really specific. Each class. When do you want them to do it? So what has to be done by the end of class? And what are they evaluated on? So for example, something like the first class, when I'm introducing the project, I would give these kind of instructions to the students. So the first instruction would be look on the board, see who's on your team. I've already created the teams. Sit with your team. Fill in the KWL chart. I'll show you the KWL chart in the next slide. They have to answer what animal are they researching? What do you already know about this animal? What do you want to know about this animal? Okay, they'd have to write their ideas on the paper. Then I want them to circle the top 3 ideas. So this is about the leopard, let's say. The leopard, what can we do to help it? What it eats, what it looks like. So this is their brainstorming. Circle their top 3 ideas. So they've brainstormed a bunch of ideas. They have to circle them. And you're going to fill in a chart. Who's going to write about what ideas? So something like this. Anna's going to write about the habitat. Jean-Francois is going to write a detailed description. Loic's going to talk about why it's endangered. So that's what they would have to fill in by the end of class. You're going to need to model what you want them to do. So do an example with the whole class together using the handouts. And while they're working in teams, you can evaluate C1. Yeah, so this is an example of a KWL chart. So as they get started, it's a great way to get them started. So so your topic is leopards, what they think they know about leopards, what they want to know about leopards, and you can get them to fill this in afterwards, what they actually learned. I did this with my son in grade 1. He and his group did Komodo dragons. What they know about Komodo dragons? Well, they thought that Komodo dragons breathed fire and flew. They got Komodo dragons mixed up with mythical dragons. What I want to know, we did things like habitat and how they fight and that kind of stuff. And what we learned that their spit is poisonous. So that was kind of cool too. There are other graphic organizers out there. This is one of my personal favorites. Anytime we do a writing project, we talk about, the audience, the purpose, some ideas. It's great. I encourage you to research. There are already some really fantastic graphic organizers there you can use and adapt. Okay, so we learned a lot here. So when you're planning a project, there are some steps for you to follow. So the first one is to think about the project overview. So consider the parameters. What's the time, the format? So you need to create a handout with a project introduction. Include the evaluation. Really important. Step 2 is you need to break down the project into steps for the students. So how many classes is this going to be? What do you do in each class? Okay, what is it that they have to get done? And make sure they do it and keep them on task because they will go off quickly. You need to support students in each step, so each class. Handouts for each class, things they have to fill in, things they have to get done. Okay, handouts to support them when they're writing, and handouts to support them when they're producing, and handouts for self-reflection and evaluation. Okay, so if you have all of this stuff in place, your chances of success are a lot higher. And of course, make sure that you have thought about your evaluation. And if project-based learning is pretty complex, and it does take a lot of work to get set up, I'm not going to lie, but once you get started on it, you're going to find that it's really actually a really valuable, enriching experience for the kids. They get really engaged, they enjoy it, they have ownership over it, they can work with their friends, and the pressure is off because they're evaluated individually. So everyone needs to step up and contribute. Your overall role here eventually will be to move from being the sage on the stage in front of the class into the guide on the side. So they'll take over their learning and be more responsible for it. Again, recap. Break your project down into steps. Help them structure their ideas. You provide the framework and timeline, and you help them reflect on their learning, and you help them think about their process and results.